The manila envelope arrived at Chisom Okafor's tiny Lagos apartment at midnight, slid under her door while she was cramming for her pharmacology exam. Inside was a single photograph and a note written in precise Korean characters with an English translation below. The photo showed her younger brother, Chukwudi, walking out of the University of Lagos campus, unaware he was being watched. The note read, "Your brother's gambling debt is now N2.8 million. I have purchased this debt. You have medical training. I have need of someone with your skills and your desperation. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., the address below. Come alone, or Chukwudi's creditors will be significantly less patient than I am. Park Yoon-jae." Chisom's hands trembled as she read the words again, her rich dark skin glistening with cold sweat. She'd never heard of Park Yoon-jae, but someone who could buy debt, track her family, and write in 2 languages wasn't making idle threats. She had 18 hours to decide if she'd walk into a trap to save her brother, or let him face consequences she couldn't imagine. Chisom sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the envelope burning in her lap like a live coal. The fluorescent bulb overhead flickered, casting harsh shadows across her small room. Medical textbooks were stacked in precarious towers against the peeling walls, each one representing a month of her food budget sacrificed. She was 24, in her second year at the University of Lagos College of Medicine, and she'd fought for every single page of education she'd earned. Her mother had died when she was 16. Her father, a retired civil servant, had drunk himself into an early grave 2 years later. That left her and Chukwudi, her baby brother, who was supposed to be studying engineering, but had instead discovered poker tables and sports betting. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Chukwudi's contact. The last time they'd spoken, 3 weeks ago, he'd assured her he was fine, that his fees were paid, that he was staying out of trouble. The lie tasted bitter even in memory. She dialed. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Chisom, it's past midnight. What's wrong?" "Chukwudi," she said, her voice low and controlled, the way their mother used to sound before she delivered punishment. "How much do you owe?" The silence stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. Then he exhaled, a shaky, defeated sound. "How did you find out? Answer me." "I don't know exactly. Maybe 2 million, maybe more. Chichi, I swear I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure it out. I had a plan." "Who did you borrow from?" "Some guys I don't know their real names. They said they'd give me a month. But then last week they sold my debt to someone else. Someone foreign. A Korean man. Chichi, these people are serious. They sent photos of me to my phone. Photos taken from across the street. They know where I sleep." Chisom closed her eyes, pressing her palm against her forehead. The weight of it crushed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. "Listen to me carefully. Stay in your dorm. Don't go out alone. I'm handling this." "How?" "Chichi, you can't pay this. You barely have money for food." "I said I'm handling it," she snapped, and ended the call before he could argue. She sat in the ringing silence of her room, staring at the address on the note. Echo Pearl Towers, Victoria Island, the most expensive district in Lagos, where diplomats and oil executives lived behind gates and armed security, where men like Park Yoon-jae conducted business that never appeared in newspapers. The next evening, Chisom stood outside the towering glass structure of Echo Pearl Towers, her worn leather bag clutched tightly against her side. She'd dressed in the only professional outfit she owned, a simple navy blue dress that her mother had bought her for her secondary school graduation, now slightly faded, but clean and pressed. Her natural hair was pulled back into a neat bun, small gold studs in her ears. She looked like what she was, a struggling student trying desperately to appear composed. The security guard at the entrance, a thick-shouldered man in a crisp black uniform, looked her up and down with open skepticism. "I have an appointment," Chisom said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Penthouse Park Yoon-jae." The guard's expression shifted instantly from dismissal to cautious respect. He lifted his radio. "Name?" "Chisom Okafor." He spoke briefly in low tones, then nodded toward the private elevator behind him. "Go up. Don't stop on any other floor." The elevator was lined with mirrors and soft golden light. Chisom watched her reflection as she ascended, seeing the tension in her shoulders, the hard set of her jaw, the fear she was working so hard to mask. The doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment that stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Lagos skyline, the city lights stretching endlessly into the humid night. The interior was minimalist and cold, all white marble, black leather, and steel. Expensive abstract art hung on the walls. Everything about the space screamed wealth, control, and danger. A man stood by the windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He was tall, lean, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. His hair was dark, styled back in a sharp, precise cut. When he turned, Chisholm felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. Park Yoon-jae was younger than she'd expected, maybe in his early 30s, with pale skin that seemed to glow against his dark clothing, sharp cheekbones, and narrow eyes that assessed her with an unsettling intensity. His lips were pressed into a thin line, neither smiling nor frowning, just measuring. "Miss Okafor," he said, his English flawless but accented, each word deliberate. "You came. You didn't give me a choice," Chisholm replied, lifting her chin. "You threatened my brother." "I stated facts," Yoon-jae corrected, walking toward her with slow, measured steps. "Your brother made choices that incurred debt. I purchased that debt. Now I own the consequences of his actions, and by extension I own leverage over you. These are simply transactions." He stopped a few feet away, studying her face. "You have 1 year left of medical training before clinical rotations, correct? Your grades are exceptional, despite working 3 part-time tutoring jobs. You specialize in trauma response and emergency medicine. You are also—" He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Desperately poor and completely alone. This makes you perfect." Chisholm's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Perfect for what?" "I operate several business channels in West Africa. Shipping, logistics, private security. Some of my associates occasionally require medical attention that cannot be obtained through traditional hospitals. Gunshot wounds, knife injuries, complications from transactions that went poorly. They need someone skilled, discreet, and most importantly, someone who has no choice but to remain silent." He walked to a sleek black table and picked up a leather folder, extending it toward her. "Your brother's debt is erased entirely. In addition, I will pay for the remainder of your medical school, all fees, all books, and provide you a monthly stipend of N200,000. In exchange, when I call, you come. You treat whoever I tell you to treat. You ask no questions, and you report nothing to authorities. You become my private resource." Chisholm took the folder with shaking hands, opening it to see the contract inside, printed in both English and Korean, dense legal language that essentially confirmed everything he'd said. At the bottom was a signature line, "And if I refuse?" Yoon-jae's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his dark eyes. "Then your brother's debt remains active, and the men I purchased it from will be informed that I am no longer interested in protecting him. They are not patient, Miss Okafor. They are not civilized. Chukwudi will disappear, and you will spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have saved him by simply signing a paper." The choice was a noose that tightened with every second. Chisholm looked down at the contract, her vision blurring slightly. Everything her mother had taught her about right and wrong, about standing firm in your principles, seemed to dissolve in the face of this impossible decision. She thought of Chukwudi's laugh, the way he used to braid her hair when they were children, how he'd held her hand at their father's funeral. She pulled a pen from her bag and signed her name. Yoon-jae took the folder back, his fingers brushing hers briefly, cool and steady. "Good. You will receive a phone tomorrow. Keep it charged and with you always. When it rings, you answer immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," Chisholm whispered. "There is one more thing," Yoon-jae added, his tone softening just slightly, though his eyes remained sharp. "You will not be harmed while under my protection. You are an investment, Miss Okafor. I protect my investments. But if you betray me, if you speak to police or try to use what you see against me, the consequences will extend beyond your brother. Do we have an understanding?" Chisholm met his gaze, her dark brown eyes locking with his. "I understand. Then we are finished. My driver will take you home." She turned toward the elevator, her legs feeling weak, her mind spinning. Just as the doors began to close, Yoon-jae spoke again, his voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "Miss Okafor, you made the right choice. Family is worth any price." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sounded like a promise and a threat woven together. The phone arrived the next morning, delivered by a courier in an unmarked black car. It was a simple smartphone, brand new, with only one contact saved. YJ. Chisholm stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her bag alongside her medical texts. She went to class, she studied, she tutored her students, but the phone was always there. A constant weight, a reminder that her life was no longer entirely her own. 2 weeks passed in tense silence. Chisholm almost convinced herself that maybe Yoonjae had forgotten about her, that maybe the contract was just a formality, and she'd never actually be called. Then at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, the phone rang. She jolted awake, her heart slamming against her ribs. The screen glowed in the darkness. YJ, she answered. Hello? 20 minutes, black car outside your building. Bring medical supplies, trauma kit if you have one. Yoonjae's voice was clipped, urgent. Stab wound, upper abdomen, heavy bleeding. Move fast, Chisholm. The line went dead. Chisholm scrambled out of bed, pulling on jeans and a dark hoodie, her hands shaking as she grabbed the emergency medical kit she'd assembled after signing the contract. She'd hoped she'd never need it. The black sedan was idling at the curb when she stumbled outside, her breath misting in the cool pre-dawn air. The driver said nothing, just pulled into traffic the moment she closed the door. They drove for 30 minutes, leaving the cramped streets of her neighborhood and heading toward the industrial port district, where shipping containers were stacked like metal mountains and the air smelled of salt and diesel. The car stopped outside a warehouse with no markings, just a rusted metal door guarded by 2 men in dark clothing. They stepped aside when they saw her, opening the door without a word. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and harsh fluorescent lights. Wooden crates were stacked along the walls, and in the center, on a makeshift table made of pallets, lay a man. He was Korean, middle-aged, his face twisted in agony, his shirt soaked through with blood. Yoonjae stood beside him, his jacket discarded, his white shirt sleeves rolled up and stained red. He looked up when Chisholm entered, and the relief in his eyes was startling. He's losing too much blood, Yoonjae said, his voice strained. I tried to compress the wound, but it's deep. He needs stitches, maybe more. Chisholm dropped her bag and moved immediately into the clinical space in her mind, the space where panic didn't exist, only procedure. She snapped on gloves, her hands suddenly steady. How long ago was he stabbed? 20 minutes. Who did it? That doesn't matter. Can you save him? Chisholm didn't answer. She peeled back the blood-soaked cloth Yoonjae had pressed over the wound, revealing a deep, jagged puncture just below the rib cage. Blood welled up steadily, dark and venous. She could see the edges of the laceration, ragged but not arterial, serious but survivable if she worked fast. I need light directly over him. And water, clean water, as much as you have. Yoonjae barked orders in Korean to the men standing nearby. Within seconds, a portable floodlight was repositioned, and bottles of purified water appeared. Chisholm irrigated the wound, her movements precise and controlled, then began exploring the depth with sterilized forceps. The man on the table groaned, his eyes rolling back. Hold him down, Chisholm ordered. I can't have him moving. Yoonjae moved without hesitation, pressing his hands firmly on the man's shoulders. Chisholm worked quickly, identifying the source of the bleeding, a severed vein that she clamped and tied off with practiced efficiency. Then she began the process of closing the wound layer by layer, her sutures neat and tight. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air. Her fingers moved with the muscle memory of countless practice sessions on synthetic skin and cadavers. But this was real, warm, bleeding flesh, and the stakes were life and death. 40 minutes later, the wound was closed, dressed, and the man's breathing had stabilized. Chisholm stepped back, peeling off her gloves, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. He needs antibiotics, IV fluids, and monitoring for the next 48 hours. If he develops a fever or the wound shows signs of infection, he needs a hospital. Yoonjae stared at her, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded slowly. You did well. I did what you paid me to do, Chisholm replied, her voice flat. Is my brother safe now? Your brother is safe as long as you continue to do what I pay you to do, Yoonjae corrected. He stepped closer, his pale face streaked with drying blood, his dark eyes intense. But yes, Chisholm, tonight you proved your value. I will not forget this. The driver took her home as the sun was beginning to rise, painting the Lagos skyline in shades of gold and pink. Chisholm sat in the back seat, staring at her hands, still faintly stained with another man's blood despite scrubbing them raw. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. She was no longer just a medical student. She was a criminal's accomplice, a shadow worker in a world she didn't understand. When she finally collapsed into bed, she didn't sleep. She just stared at the ceiling, wondering how many more calls would come, and how much of her soul she'd have to trade to keep Chukwudi alive. Over the next 3 months, the phone rang 4 more times. Each call was urgent, each situation desperate. A gunshot wound to the thigh, a broken arm that needed setting after a fight went wrong, an allergic reaction to something Chisholm didn't ask about. Each time she went, she worked, she saved lives she probably shouldn't have saved. And each time, Yunjae was there, watching her with that same intense, unreadable expression. The money appeared in her account like clockwork. Her tuition was paid in full. She moved into a better apartment, one with reliable electricity and running water. She bought new textbooks, real meals, a decent mattress. The guilt was a constant weight, but so was the relief. Chukwudi called her every week, oblivious and cheerful, talking about his classes and his new girlfriend, unaware of the price his sister had paid for his safety. Then, on a humid Friday evening, the phone rang with a different kind of urgency. Yunjae's voice was tight, almost panicked. "Chisholm, I need you, not for someone else, for me." Her blood ran cold. "What happened?" "Come to the penthouse. Quickly, don't tell anyone." She arrived 20 minutes later, her heart hammering. The security guard waved her through immediately, his face grim. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, she found Yunjae sitting on the white leather sofa, his jacket discarded, his shirt partially unbuttoned. His left hand was wrapped in a blood-soaked towel, held tightly against his chest. "What happened?" Chisholm demanded, crossing the room quickly and kneeling beside him. "A negotiation went poorly," Yunjae said through gritted teeth. His face was pale, his forehead damp with sweat, knife across the palm deep. I think it might have severed tendons. Chisholm carefully unwrapped the towel, revealing a vicious, gaping laceration across his left palm, blood flowing freely. She could see the pale gleam of exposed tendon. "This needs a hospital, Yunjae. This needs a surgeon." "No hospitals," he said firmly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You can do this. I trust you." "Trust doesn't repair tendons!" Chisholm snapped, but she was already pulling supplies from her bag. "If I close this without proper surgical tools, you could lose function in your hand permanently." "Then don't let that happen," Yunjae replied, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "Please, Chisholm." The please broke something in her. She'd never heard him ask for anything, only command. She took a breath, steadying herself, and began to work. She irrigated the wound, numbed it with local anesthetic from her kit, and then, using the finest suture she had and a magnifying headlamp she'd brought for precision work, she began the painstaking process of repairing the severed tendons. It took 2 hours. Yunjae didn't make a sound, but she could feel the tension radiating from him, see the way his jaw clenched, the way his right hand gripped the sofa cushion so hard his knuckles went white. When she finally finished, wrapping his hand in clean bandages, she sat back on her heels, exhausted. "You need to keep this immobilized for at least 2 weeks. No heavy use, and you need antibiotics." "I have antibiotics," Yunjae murmured. He was staring at his bandaged hand. Then slowly, he lifted his gaze to her face. "Thank you." The gratitude in his voice was raw, unguarded. Chisholm felt something shift in her chest, something dangerous. "You're welcome," she whispered. Yunjae reached out with his good hand, his fingers brushing against her cheek, a feather-light touch that sent electricity racing down her spine. "You are remarkable, Chisholm. I have known many people in my life, dangerous people, brilliant people, ruthless people. But I have never met anyone like you." "You don't know me," Chisholm replied, but her voice wavered. "I know you better than you think," Yunjae said softly. "I know you sacrifice yourself for people who don't deserve it. I know you carry weight that would crush most people, and you do it without complaint. I know you are stronger than you believe." His hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, his touch warm and steady. Chisholm's breath hitched. She should pull away. She should leave, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into him, and when his lips met hers, she didn't resist. The kiss was slow, deep, tasting of copper and desperation. His good hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she responded with a hunger that shocked her, her hands gripping his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yoon-jae rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight," he whispered. "Not because I'm paying you, because I want you here." Chisholm closed her eyes. Every logical part of her screamed that this was a mistake, that crossing this line would destroy whatever fragile boundary still existed between them. But she was tired of logic. She was tired of being alone. "Okay," she breathed. She stayed. They moved to his bedroom, a vast space dominated by a massive bed with crisp white sheets. Yoon-jae undressed her slowly, his injured hand clumsy but gentle, his lips tracing paths across her dark skin that made her gasp and arch into him. Chisholm had been with men before, awkward college encounters that left her feeling empty. This was different. This was fire and desperation and need. His pale body pressed against her deep brown skin, a contrast that felt both startling and inevitable. Afterward, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I never meant for this to happen," Yoon-jae admitted quietly into the darkness. "For what to happen?" Chisholm asked. "For you to matter," he replied. "You were supposed to be a transaction, a useful tool, but somewhere between the first call and tonight, you became something more." Chisholm lifted her head, looking at him. "What am I to you now?" Yoon-jae's dark eyes searched hers. "I don't know yet, but I know I don't want to lose you." The confession should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a strange, reckless hope. She kissed him again, slower this time, and whispered against his lips, "Then don't." The next 3 months were a blur of stolen moments and dangerous balance. Chisholm continued her studies, acing her exams, but her nights increasingly belonged to Yoon-jae. He would call, and sometimes it was for medical emergencies, but more often, it was just to see her. They'd have dinner in his penthouse, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Seoul, the son of a powerful business family who'd sent him to West Africa to expand their interests, how he'd discovered he was better at navigating the shadows than the boardrooms. She told him about her parents, about the pressure of being the last hope for her family's name, about the fear that she was losing herself in this double life. "You're not losing yourself," Yoon-jae said one night. "You're discovering who you really are, strong enough to survive in my world, compassionate enough to hate it. That tension is what makes you extraordinary." But the balance couldn't last. It shattered on a rainy Tuesday night when Chisholm's phone rang with a call that wasn't from Yoon-jae. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, harsh, speaking accented English. "Miss Okafor, you will come to the port, warehouse 17 immediately. Park Yoon-jae has been injured. If you value his life, you will come alone and tell no one." The line went dead. Chisholm's hands shook as she grabbed her medical bag and ran out into the rain. The taxi ride to the port felt endless, her mind racing with terrifying possibilities. When she reached warehouse 17, the door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open, her heart in her throat. Inside, Yoon-jae was tied to a chair in the center of the empty space, his face bruised and bloodied. Standing behind him was a man she'd never seen before, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a gun casually pointed at Yoon-jae's head. 2 other men flanked them, both armed. "Miss Okafor," the man with the gun said, smiling coldly. "Thank you for coming. I am Jin-ho, Yoon-jae's former partner. We had a disagreement about how certain business should be conducted. He thought he could cut me out." I disagreed. Chisholm's eyes locked on Yoon-jae. His dark gaze was fierce. "Chisholm, leave now." "She's not leaving," Jin-ho interrupted. "Because if she does, I kill you. But if she stays and does exactly what I say, maybe you both live." He turned his cold smile on Chisholm. "You are his weakness, Miss Okafor. He has been distracted, careless, all because of you. So now you're going to prove your loyalty. You're going to treat him, patch him up, and then you're going to watch while I decide whether he's worth keeping alive or not." Chisholm's mind raced. She needed to buy time. "Let me see his injuries," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. Jin-ho gestured with the gun. "Go ahead. But remember, one wrong move, and I paint these walls with his brain." Chisholm approached Yoon-jae slowly, kneeling beside the chair. She opened her bag, pulling out gauze and antiseptic. His face was a mess of cuts and bruises, but nothing immediately life-threatening. As she dabbed at the blood on his cheek, She leaned close, her lips nearly brushing his ear. "Trust me," she whispered. Yoonjae's eyes flickered, just slightly in acknowledgement. Chisholm reached into her bag again, this time palming the small scalpel she kept in the inner pocket. It wasn't much, but it was sharp. She turned slightly, positioning herself between Yoonjae and Jin-ho. "He has a deep laceration on his temple. I need to clean it properly or it will get infected." As she worked, she waited for the right moment, her heart hammering. Jin-ho was talking, gloating about how he'd planned this for weeks, how Yoonjae had grown soft. The two guards were watching, but their attention was on their boss, not on her hands. Chisholm took a breath, steadied herself, and then in one fluid motion she spun and hurled the scalpel directly at Jin-ho. It wasn't a perfect throw. She wasn't trained for combat, but desperation gave her aim. The blade struck him in the shoulder, and he roared in pain and surprise, the gun jerking upward. The distraction was all Yoonjae needed. He threw his weight backward, tipping the chair and breaking free of the ropes that had been loosened by his struggling. He surged upward, driving his shoulder into the nearest guard's stomach, sending him sprawling. The second guard raised his weapon, but Chisholm was already moving, grabbing a metal pipe from the floor and swinging it wildly. It connected with the man's wrist, and the gun clattered away. The fight was chaotic. Yoonjae moved with lethal precision despite his injuries, disarming Jin-ho and driving him to the ground. Within minutes, all three men were subdued, groaning on the concrete floor. Yoonjae stood over Jin-ho, breathing hard, blood dripping from his temple. He looked at Chisholm, his eyes blazing with something between fury and admiration. "You should have run." "I don't run," Chisholm replied, her voice shaking but firm. "Not from you, not from this." Yoonjae crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "You are insane and brilliant, and He stopped, his voice catching. "I cannot lose you, Chisholm, I won't." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Yoonjae had called them before the ambush, Chisholm realized. This had been a trap, but not the kind Jin-ho had planned. "We need to leave before the police arrive and start asking questions you can't answer," Yoonjae said, taking her hand with his uninjured one and leading her toward a back exit. They disappeared into the rain-soaked night, running together through the maze of shipping containers until they reached his car, hidden 2 blocks away. Finally, Yoonjae pulled over on a quiet overlook above the Lagos harbor. He turned to her, his face serious. "This is the reality of my life, Chisholm. Betrayal, violence, danger. I can offer you money, protection, anything you want, but I cannot offer you safety, and I will not trap you in this world if you want to leave." Chisholm looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man who had blackmailed her into his service, and then somehow become the person she cared about most in the world. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," Yoonjae said immediately, "but I want you to choose freely. No debt, no obligation. If you walk away tonight, your brother stays safe, your school stays paid, and I'll never contact you again. That is my promise." It was the choice she'd never had before. Real freedom. Chisholm thought about her mother's voice, about principles of right and wrong. She thought about the scared girl who'd signed a contract at midnight. She wasn't that girl anymore. She'd been forged into something harder, something that could stand in the darkness and not break. "I choose to stay," Chisholm said softly. "Not because of debt or money or fear. I stay because I choose you, Yoonjae. All of you, even the dangerous parts. Maybe especially the dangerous parts." Yoonjae closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, they were wet. "Then we do this differently. No more secrets between us. You become my partner, not my employee. Equal what I build, we build together. Do you understand what I'm offering you?" "I understand," Chisholm whispered. "And I accept. Then let's go home." Months later, Chisholm walked across the stage at her medical school graduation, her navy blue gown billowing behind her, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo wrapped with gold thread. Her degree was earned, her debt was erased, and sitting in the 3rd row, wearing an impeccably tailored gray suit and smiling with genuine pride, was Park Yoonjae. Beside him, beaming and oblivious to the complicated truth of how his sister had saved him, was Chukwudi. After the ceremony, Yoonjae took her hand as they walked through the campus, the late afternoon sun casting long golden shadows. His soft Korean accent colored his words as he said, "Dr. Okafor," testing the title. "It suits you. It does, Chisholm agreed, smiling. What now? Now, Yoonji said, stopping and turning to face her fully. I have a proposal. Not the kind that involves contracts and threats. A different kind. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Chisholm's breath caught. He opened it, revealing a simple, elegant ring, a single diamond set in platinum. His sharp Korean features softened as he spoke. I am not a good man, Chisholm. I have done terrible things, and I will probably do more. But with you, I want to try to be better. You are my conscience, my anchor, my reason to build something more than just an empire of shadows. Will you marry me? Chisholm looked at the ring, at his face, at the hope and fear mingled in his dark eyes. She thought about the girl who'd found an envelope at midnight, who'd made impossible choices, who'd discovered that sometimes the right path leads through darkness before it finds light. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, I'll marry you. Yoonjae slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. And around them, other graduates and families passed by, oblivious to the fact that they were witnessing the union of two worlds, Nigeria and Korea, that should never have met, but had somehow, against all odds, found a way to fit together. As they walked away hand in hand, Chisholm glanced back once at the medical school, at the place where she'd fought so hard to become someone who could save lives. She'd succeeded, just not in the way she'd ever imagined. She'd saved her brother. She'd saved Yoonjae. And somewhere along the way, she'd saved herself. The future was uncertain, still shadowed by the nature of Yoonjae's business, but it was theirs to shape. Together, they would navigate the darkness and find their own light. And if you've made it this far in their story, consider subscribing to see what happens next. Hit that like button if you felt Chisholm's struggle and Yoonjae's transformation, and drop a comment below telling us, would you have signed that contract? Would you have chosen love in the face of danger? Let us know, because your voice matters, and we'll see you in the next story.